Ladies and gentlemen, Beyond Light brings with it a whole suite of changes being made to Destiny 2, and the one that garnered the most excitement was without a doubt the addition of new subclasses. And not just the new skill tree with a new super like we saw in Forsaken, but a whole new element in the form of Stasis, the first of what many theorize to be one of 3 darkness subclasses, with a new one being released each year. But after a long wait, we can finally get our hands on these Stasis subclasses and really dig in and see what they can do. I'm gonna be covering all 3, but we're kicking things off with the Shadebinder Warlock, because, well, good old Ironworker is a Warlock main through and through. So we'll have a look at our new abilities in both PvP and PvE, and try to figure out exactly what they're capable of and how effective they are. And if at any point you find this information useful, helpful, or enjoyable, please remember to leave it a like. And definitely consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel, to ensure that you don't miss any of the content that I'm cooking up for Beyond Light. But let's kick things off with a quick subclass breakdown. Alright, first off, if you have not unlocked your new subclass yet, you will have full access to it at the end of the Beyond Light campaign. But when you open up your subclass menu, you're going to be greeted by the reorganized user interface. There are a few similarities to the older subclasses, but we also have some new additions here. We have a choice between a healing rift and an empowering rift, just like with the other subclasses, and they function in the exact same way. For our jump abilities, we have the choice between Strafe Glide and Balance Glide. The base melee for our Shadebinder is Penumbral Blast, which sends a blast of stasis forward to freeze your targets. We'll have one initial grenade to start out with, which is Glacier Grenade. This creates a wall out of stasis shards that can block damage, freeze targets, and this wall can be shattered to deal damage. We're also going to cover the first aspect you'll receive in this video, as well as the first alternate grenade. But as far as further customization options, we're going to save that for another video. This one's just going to be the basics. Our new super is Winter's Wrath. Upon activating it, you'll summon a staff that can cast out a barrage of stasis shards that freeze targets. You can also cast a shockwave that shatters frozen targets. We'll take a look at this first. Simply put, this is a primer detonator function, and that is the general premise of Stasis as a whole. First thing we'll do is cast out some stasis orbs in the hopes of tagging some enemy targets and freezing them solid. Each cast will throw out 4 orbs that do carry some tracking and a moderately sized blast radius. This will freeze any enemy that it impacts, or any enemy that is near enough to the blast. And these do carry some impact and blast damage with them, so if you tag a trash ad with one of these orbs, it's a good chance they're going to immediately shatter. But once we have some frozen targets on the field, we can cast our shockwave to deal major damage to stasis affected targets. And also keep in mind, in general, when using stasis, frozen enemies that take lethal damage will shatter, causing additional blast damage. Another thing to note is the fact that the shockwave alone does next to nothing to an enemy target. The damage is very minor. As far as the super meter consumption goes, the casting of the stasis barrage is the thing that's going to spend chunks of the bar. The casting of the shockwave will not eat into the duration. For the Penumbral Blast melee ability, we cast out a single stasis orb that functions in the same manner as our super stasis barrage, except for the fact that obviously we're only putting out 1 orb rather than 4. And also, there is very little target tracking, if any, on this travel time projectile. So you're gonna need to be fairly accurate with these things. Once again, this is gonna deal impact and blast damage, and enemies struck or caught by the blast will be frozen. Frozen enemies do not necessarily take more weapon damage, but they do take blast damage when the stasis around them is shattered. And a good rule of thumb to keep in mind also is that the stronger the enemy, the shorter the freeze duration will be. Trash ads might stay frozen for a good long while, while bosses or mini-bosses might only be affected for a moment. And this charged melee does have a short travel distance on it, so don't expect to be using it like Celestial Fire. Then the Glacier Grenade will create a stasis wall that sprawls out in both directions from the point of impact, and perpendicular to the direction of the grenade's travel path. The damage from the grenade itself is minimal, but targets caught in the wall will be frozen. Now you can also shoot this wall and shatter the individual pillars, dealing blast damage to nearby targets. But the damage from a singular pillar shattered is not very high, and the blast radius isn't very large. And while the wall created by this grenade is quite wide, the depth of it is fairly narrow. So if freezing an enemy is your goal, you're going to want to land this grenade directly to the left or right of them. These grenades can also be a useful tool for sealing off doorways, creating temporary cover, or sticking to walls to create a platform that you can stand on. While on the subject of grenades, we'll have a look at the first alternate grenade ability that you'll receive, the Duskfield Grenade. This grenade shatters on impact, leaving behind a field that slows targets and freezes those who do not leave the volume. If you want to unlock this grenade, finish the main Beyond Light campaign, and then work through the first 2 parts of the Born in Darkness quest. And that is parts, not steps. Functionally, this grenade does exactly what you'd think it should do. On impact, it creates a stasis bubble, enemies trapped inside are slowed and eventually frozen, leaving them open to be shattered. And if you're quick enough, a single target can be frozen twice by this grenade. Then we'll take a look at the first aspect you'll be able to get your hands on, which is Ice Flare Bolts. To unlock your first aspect, you will need to finish the Stasis Prototype quest. This isn't what gets you the aspect, but you will need Salvation's Grip to complete the quest steps in the Aspect of Control quest. Both of these are also available post-campaign. With Ice Flare Bolts, when shattering a frozen target, it spawns Seekers that track down and freeze other nearby targets. You can see this in action on screen. We freeze a target, shatter them. The Seeker rolls across the ground, finds another enemy target, and freezes them. As far as I can tell, this can happen up to 5 times before the Ice Flare Bolts go on cooldown. But those Seekers are only going to travel around 10 to 15 meters, so enemies at least need to be in the proximity for it to work. Also, this is a ground-based effect, so your targets at least need to be near the ground for this to work. And hopefully, that covers the subclass basics sufficiently enough. But how does the new Shadebinder Warlock stack up performance-wise? I gotta say, initially, performance-wise, I was a little underwhelmed. While I did find the Shadebinder Warlock to be a fun change-up to the base gameplay of Destiny 2, for PvP, I was having a hard time trying to figure out why I would want to run Stasis over one of the initial 3 subclasses. The new super seemed to do a pretty good job with crowd control, but didn't really accomplish much more than any of the other crowd control supers. And as far as single target damage goes, it's not poor, but it certainly doesn't pack the same punch as Nova Bomb. Then the Glacier Wall Grenade, while it does pack some nice utility, it's just not really a good reliable option from an offensive perspective. And the melee attack often left me wondering, why would I freeze a target and then shoot them when I can just shoot them? There are 2 things that kinda turned me around on the subclass though. First, when multiple players are running Stasis, there's a whole lot more freezing and shattering going on than when you're running solo. This really makes light work out of most encounters, where the enemies are for the most part all frozen and serve as stasis bombs in waiting. And the second thing that really piqued my interest was unlocking the first aspect. The chain freezing is very effective, and really it boosts the effectiveness of stasis as a whole. This really left me wanting to see what other options and customizations we can acquire to make this stasis subclass even stronger. And this is when it really dawned on me that what we're working with now is just the base for Shadebinder. And as we continue to flesh out this subclass, it doesn't only become more diverse, but it actually becomes stronger. As far as PvP goes, while currently everything in the Crucible is kind of an icy mess, it's clear to see the potential of Shadebinder. In here, the Duskfield Grenade seems very useful, since even slowing a target in PvP can be a huge benefit. Most of the time, a player who looks like they're trying to run in sand is just as easy to down as a player who's frozen solid. Then the Glacier Grenade, while not my preferred choice, could serve as a great defensive tool in comp game modes. Then the Penumbral Blast melee can be tricky, because it does require some timing and precision, but it is still a very strong tool to have in the bag. All the pieces are in place for Shadebinder to be a very effective class in PvP going forward, and I'm very interested to see where Shadebinder lands after all the stasis craze settles down a little bit. But that's gonna wrap us up for the Shadebinder Basics video. I do plan on making a more advanced guide on this subclass in the near future. So if you'd like to catch that video or any of the other videos coming out of the Ironworker Gaming channel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of them. Please remember to leave this video a like if you did enjoy it, and look for Ironworker814 on Twitch if you'd like to catch me live one of these days. And with all that being said, I'd like to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this video. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.